All right, good day, everybody. Welcome to the webinar, The Benefits of Triage, how to quick start your digital investigation. First off, I want to thank you all for taking your time out of your busy day and spending the next hour with me. A couple things right up front before I jump right into it. As I'm going through, if you should have any questions at all, there is a question panel that you can use to type in your questions, and we will answer those towards the end. If anybody's having any technical issues, again, you could type those into the questions panel, and there is somebody available to hopefully help you out with that. So again, this is the benefits of triage. I'm Richard Frawley, digital forensic specialist here at ADF Solutions. I've spent 22 years in law enforcement, 17 of those as a certified forensic computer examiner and investigator in the computer crimes unit in my department. And early on in my career, we adopted Triage. We had a one-man shop, and we had a lot of work coming into the lab. So getting a lot of work from online undercover, which my partner was doing, all the chats, cyber tips from the ICAC, work from other departments, homicides, frauds, threats. And I'll tell you, one of my favorite, if you ever put together a list of the favorite cases you worked on, my number one was a jury tampering case. It was just absolutely out of the norm and a great case to work. But early on, we adopted a policy, try where we could to weed out computers that did not need to come into the lab, didn't need to be seized. And we did this both in the lab and on scene, especially with work coming from other departments. They'd bring you a stack of stuff and you'd have to go through it and weed it out. And that's kind of what we're going to get at, part of what we're going to get at today. We come in, we use boot CDs, network crossovers. Eventually that turned into the live and boot USB devices. Use a variety of tools. We all need that. We all know that need for the stock toolbox. And the number of devices has never stopped. It's increasing over and over and over. So, having that ability to eliminate or at least assign a priority to a device really helps out immensely in the lab. Then that started developing into that ability to make decisions on scene. Combination of good old-fashioned police work and the technical ability to preview and triage computers right where they sat. As long as we had the evidence in front of us and we were able to develop that PC, making the arrest that day solved a lot of the exigency in the lab, right? And took the bad guy off the street that day as compared to weeks or months. So after 3 months, about 3 years ago, I joined ADF Solutions. It's a company that garnered several digital forensic patents more than 12 years ago, built its reputation as a triage company, and with roots, in the digital forensic triage, the early years were spent creating software specifically for image identification and analysis of child exploitation, and government and law enforcement agencies being the main driver asking for this technology. Our immediate value as a triage tool was in providing immediate on-scene intelligence and the capture of potential evidentiary information. And it's since morphed into solutions that are easier to use for investigators and helping reduce that backlog. Excuse me here. So first thing I'm going to do here is just start out with a quick poll, if you don't mind. These are going to pop up. Give a quick answer here. All right. All right. So just we have about a third of us are just forensic examiners. We got about a quarter of us as investigators. Another third doing both, which is a position I came from, and a lot of the smaller places are like that. So great, thanks for taking part of that poll. And now, all right. So here we go. Moving on into today, we're just going to go over, we did the introductions. We're going to go over what triage is, kind of back into the history of it a little bit, where it comes today, go into the strategy, how to be successful with it. Different tips and tricks in there. So I'm going to look at use cases on how this can be used, especially where I'm coming from and where the tool's coming from, and some things to remember, and then we'll do the questions and we'll wrap it up there towards the end. Good place here to mention too that today's a lot of talk on the theory and going over triage and what it is and how to use it. It's not tool specific, but we as ADF, again, will be running a webinar in about a week or so. I'll have the exact date at the end, but that will be tool specific and taking these, what we talk about today and putting it into the tool specifically. So what is triage? Let's get right into that. Let's jump into a little history of this, right? So early 18th century, it's the act of sorting items according to quality. The French word trier, separate out, or to cull. Okay, so early 1700s, sorting out the wool, they would have a certain amount of bales that would have to be done, and after it was triaged or separated out, they would expect to have some that were refined and some that were prime. Early 1800s, you could see here right out of the Oxford, dictionary, that also for coffee. And you had the best quality, you had the middling, and then you had what they actually called triage coffee, the stuff that was picked out, the stuff that was not necessarily what they wanted. So let's move this up a little bit to Dr. Jean Leray. He first used triage in the medical sense as a surgeon-in-chief of Napoleon's armies. He sorted battlefield casualties into 3 groups, and the etymology of the word triage actually means to break into 3 pieces. So he broke it into 3 pieces, and it was patients who would probably die no matter what, patients who would most likely live no matter what, and those who would survive with immediate treatment but would not survive without it. So you can see there, it's picking out the most important of what needs to be done here. So bringing that forward, so moving through history from the 1700s into the 1800s and now modern time, you can see that medical text, this is according to the World Medical Association, actually had 5 categories, but 4 of them get used, such as I have up here. So it's those who cannot be saved, but whose lives are in immediate danger, requiring treatment immediately or within a few hours. So that's our number 1. That's our red triage tag. That's immediate. That's a priority 1. Your priority 2, right, those whose lives are not in immediate danger, but who need urgent, but not immediate medical care. So, a little less down the line, but to give it it's a delayed priority. It's a priority 2. Those who only require the minor treatment, green, they're going to be waiting. It's minimal, a priority 3. And then your priority 4, those are, conditions that exceed the available therapeutic resources, who have severe injuries, such as burns, or to the extent and degree that they cannot be saved. So we all know, it's like a DRT, dead right there. Black triage tag, expected, no priority, number 4. And they did have a 5th one, and that was psychologically traumatized and may need reassurance or sedation to keep them going. So let's just step through, and this is today's definition, simplified. It's the process of determining the most important people or things from amongst a large number that require attention. So pretty simple, most important people or things from among, a large amount. Basically what we were talking about in the introduction and kind of how we saw it in the medical, but moving forward. But let's pair that with investigate. So, as we look at history of triage and how it's been and currently is being utilized, if we look at this, triage kind of fits into this definition. You're carrying out a systematic or formal inquiry to discover and examine the facts of an incident or allegation so as to establish the truth. So triage is part of that investigative process, and it's kind of important to remember, especially in the way you're going to use triage, and if it's something you are going to adapt or what you are in. And speaking of that, I am going to ask you another poll question here. So triage has become an accepted practice in my agency. I have true or false up there. It is one of those things that it needs to be used right, but it can be an accepted practice. And for what I'm seeing here, the results are overwhelmingly 100% true, and that is awesome. That's good to see. So let me close that out there. All right. So we're going to cover the art of triaging in conducting initial investigation of digital evidence. I like to use both in the same, especially if anybody's ever heard me talk before. I like to give it that early case assessment, on-scene investigation, in-lab investigation, or triage. Where are we going with this? We need to bridge that gap sometimes between the investigator and the examiner as well. Sometimes there's lays a gap when this needs to be done, and we kind of have to finesse that as well. Because an investigator, we've typically put a lot of hours in to get to this place, right? To find out where that digital evidence is. Or maybe it's already in your hands and now you need the information on the device to continue that that investigation and not wait for it. Just think, a lot of times this falls back on the child exploitation cases, cyber tips, peer-to-peer, human trafficking, so on and so forth. There's some sort of digital evidence to locate, and get to those devices. Once you have that in your hand, you want to continue to follow that path, make your decisions, come to a logical conclusion sooner rather than later. In some cases, this evidence is going to sit on a shelf waiting for a deep dive investigation, and you're stuck waiting at times. So, you don't want that case to become stale. You want to be able to get to that information and keep it in your hands, especially if you're one of those investigators who has a case, goes out and does your own search warrants, but then takes the device to another lab. You kind of want to keep some of that in your hand. And this is a perfect way to do that. Sometimes you get called to a scene, computer's up, running. There may be some type of encryption on there. You don't know, but you're prepared if you have triage as part of your process, right? So maybe you go out there, and this is an actual case that I was talking to somebody about. They got there. The person that was there for a medical emergency and ends up, the computer's up, and they were selling steroids on the dark web. So there's this computer up, and they were able to triage that computer after a little bit more of on-scene investigation before getting to the digital device, but they were able to find out there's cryptocurrency, and that's how he was doing his stuff. And they had that information in their hands sooner rather than later. So you have to think of some things like that. And consent, right? I know a lot of people don't do consent searches. I know we're talking, internationally today, but for a lot of people, there are what's called knock and talks and consent searches, where either you can go into a house, and look at a computer, or somebody gives you the consent to pull some specific information from that device. This perfect, falls under that. Whether you're campus, customs, HR, parole, probation, special investigation units, and even private sector, we all want that information fast to make those decisions on. Triage or rapid investigation allows for this to happen. Especially private sector, time is money, money's time. The faster you can get to the information you want, the better off you're going to be with your customers. And coming from the role of investigator and examiner, I was able to bridge that gap, getting that relevant information up front and allowing me to continue with the investigation. So I am going to throw out another poll here, if you don't mind. So as an examiner, having control of an on-scene investigation is important. And this is kind of for the examiners out there. You want to be able to know what's going on scene, right? You want to be able to know that what's being pulled from the computer is the right stuff that's being pulled from the computer, that it's just not let's say a willy-nilly type of looking around or poking around. So just think, with the tool, if you can set it up and put on a USB device exactly what you want the investigator to run and do, and he can only do that one thing, that kind of gives you that kind of helps you cover that gap, if you will, helps you bring that a little closer together. And it makes it a little easier if you could do that as well. It frees up your time for other stuff that needs to be done. But about 90% of that on that poll was, yeah, as an examiner, you want to have control of that scene. You want to have control of what's being collected. And it can be done. I'm just letting you know that you can have control of what's collected, and your investigators will be able to keep a little bit of that evidence, and we'll be able to free up some time as we go through that. So let's look at some of the benefits. You get your relevant information up front. You have your records organized for easy analysis. You can do some comprehensive reporting with this information, and continuing investigation will be simple. Not every case is a deep dive worthy case, all right? The investigation can come to a logical conclusion with just specific information gathered from that device, and you know exactly what it is before you go in. So that triage and on-scene investigation can kind of help you with that. And please don't take this as I'm relaying this to child exploitation cases. You can gather information, you can move on to your investigation, but that computer definitely needs to go on for due diligence, no victim left on a shelf type. But if you have something else where you could just pull out some pictures from ThumbsDB, or you pull out a couple of Excel spreadsheets or PDF documents that you were specifically looking for, make your report, put it together, make your arrest, and then if that computer needs to come back out later with, if a plea deal hasn't been made or case hasn't been solved, then you could do that, later. Because 90% of your cases can be solved with 10% of the data. And you want to get to that point early by targeting what you believe is that 10%, what you're looking for. And maybe when you are targeting it, you do get what you want and you finish a case, or you don't get what you want and you need to go to that deep dive. So it all works out in that, again, a deep dive, due diligence, or peace of mind searches can be done at a later time. This doesn't replace the deep dive investigation. Or examination. It saves time, it saves money, it saves space, and it helps you move your cases on faster. And this could be done in the lab and on scene. So just a little bit of history. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but if you go back into looking up just quick Google searches and stuff, you can go back as far as the early 2000s for some peer-reviewed text that's online regarding triage or on-scene investigations. There was automated analysis for digital forensic science way back in 2002. They were talking in 2005 about a digital evidence bag where it was a universal container for the capture of digital evidence. 2009, you start getting into mobile, right? And triage models, and 2010, the need for on-scene mobile triage, because really 2006, 2007, mobile took off, right? And I remember 2006, 2007, I myself was in the National White Collar Crime Stop classes, for the secure technique for on-scene previews, which was, I think we used Helix back at the time for that. So you had the text, the classes, and tools. Like I said, some of the earliers, I used Tux, I used Helix, were some of your boot disks. We used Network Crossover for previews. A lot of tools in the box to be able to go out and do that. Let's look at the types. So triage can get you results that fall into that low-hanging fruit, the yes/no categories. It's meant to be fast, give you that peace of mind, right place, right computer, right evidence. Typically finds a few pieces of evidence, gives you a bare bones report, if any report at all, depending on how you're doing this. And there's different ways to conduct these triage investigations or examinations. And they're employed in many ways across your investigation and examination field. So we have previews, right? Using your full forensic suite, hooking up to the hard disk drive, previewing until something's found. Typically used in a lab setting or a mobile vehicle where you have the ability to take those tools out there. Where removing the device from the location is more beneficial than doing it right in front of you, right? The type of place you walk into and you have to wipe your feet before you walk back out into the world because you don't want to get the world dirty. We've all been in those houses. But sometimes when you do this, this is where it does require that trained examiner. You are using a deep dive tool. You are taking a hard drive maybe out of its shell or out of its computer. You're hooking it up via network cable, something. So you're going to need somebody who's a little more trained in that. It's somewhat fast because you do have the time for removing the hard drives and then putting it all back together. Typically finds your low-hanging fruit. Doesn't typically collect artifacts. So it's yeah, there it is. Okay, we're good. Let's move on, which is fine. These are all valid ways of doing this. You have your live scans. So you're up, you're running. Maybe encryption's on this computer, but it's up and running when you walk in. First thing you're going to do is collect RAM. So live scans, RAM is your utmost importance. First order of business. It contains all that valuable data that's, could be altered or overwritten during a live scan. It's scanning, collecting evidence in a short amount of time, looking for the low-hanging fruit. You can stop it when the evidence is located, or you can let it run a little longer and gather information to keep in that investigator's hands so they can move on with that case. And again, like I said, with live scans, changes are going to be made when the USB is inserted. Changes are made when a program is executed. While that program is running, no dates, times, metadata should be changed on your forensic machine. It is not, forensically sound in that. It's forensically sound in that way, but it is going to step on your RAM. So just be aware of live scans and what you're in for. They definitely help. They're definitely good in child exploitation cases, but you need to know what they do. Boot scans, so that's booting to a USB device or a CD, scanning and collecting the evidence similar to a live. You're able to get more information in a short amount of time, put it all together, keep it in your hands, keep your case going, and it's forensically sound. So option computers off, go the boot scan way and get your information and make your decisions. And then scanning forensic images. So you're in the lab and your policy is to image everything. You can image everything and then go through those images and decide, what's pertinent and what's not pertinent and move on in your case. Assign it that level of what it needs to do. So let's move into a little bit of the strategy here. So as I was saying, triage can be done in the lab as well as on scene, and it has a lot of benefits, right? Scanning multiple devices and images for cases where numerous devices have been seized. With any of those filtering and sorting capabilities, the analysis of multiple devices can easily eliminate those with no specific evidence, kind of what I was alluding to before. Where your digital evidence lies is where the processing will take place. Just because your device is in the lab, doesn't negate it from being triaged, right? You can load up 3 or 4 images or 3 or 4 devices and run information to pull information out of it and say, yep, this one's good, this one's good, we want to look at this one, and these two, put them back on the shelf. We don't need those at this point. Also great in the house, law enforcement or whoever, you're on a search warrant and you're going to seize a bunch of stuff from a house, and the family, usually, there's a spouse or children involved that have nothing to do with it. Their computers have nothing to do with it. So you can scan those and leave those behind. So those are a couple of the different goals that you can reach as going through this. Specifically, you have an investigation covering many locations and persons. The need to cull through that data, expeditiously is first and foremost. The need to get through it, decide what's important, get your names, get your contacts, get your information, get your pictures, get whatever you need to keep that case going. It pays dividends when you do it up front instead of bringing it all back. And then looks like I was talking about knock and talks and consent searches. One of my earliest was back in 2001, 2001 with Operation Avalanche, when we were doing knock and talks and child exploitation cases. And that was a combination of good old-fashioned police work and speed and technology. So that's important on knock and talks too, is you need to get in and get that information fast before they change their mind on you, right? And if they do change their mind, you want to make sure that your tool is collecting everything and that everything's over on that key. So when you stop, whatever was collected at that point is yours, and you can go through and analyze that. Right. So, just make sure I'm in the right place here. So let's look back at kind of what we just discussed with triage and investigation. I've been kind of putting those two words together there. What's our purpose for being there? What does our wording dictate about our case later? I like to incorporate the word investigation, especially if I'm making a decision or pulling out more information. If I'm truly doing a look, there's the contraband, let's stop the scan, let's move on type of triage, maybe I wouldn't use the word investigate. But if I was pulling more information and making decisions about what I've pulled out, just think about investigation. Carry out a systematic or formal inquiry to discover and examine the facts of an incident. It helps, when you're putting that report together, your narrative can state something to the fact that this is not, this is not necessarily something I'm putting out to say, yeah, you have to have this in your report. It was just, something I may have used in a couple of mine. I conducted that on-scene investigation into the contents of the digital devices located in the suspect's residence. Investigation included the collection of digital evidence from the devices in order to triage and eliminate unnecessary devices from being seized, right? You're patting yourself on the back and saying, this is the reason, one of the reasons I'm in here doing this. I'm gathering information and I'm also eliminating and keeping the family with their computers. Kind of gives more credence to the activities and the where triage places in your investigation. And you just further my investigation, such and such a decision was made, blah blah blah. So you can kind of look at it that way. So the next poll here is an investigator. I would like to have more data up front to continue my investigation. I'm just putting that poll out there now. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, just to get an idea where everybody is in this type of these types of situations. These polls give me a second to grab a drink of water here too, because if you notice, I kind of talk and ramble and move a little fast. So excuse me if I'm talking too fast for some of you there. All right. So out of the answers we've had there, 100% were, yeah, I want that information up front. I would love to have that in my hands. That's great to see. So putting the information in your hands on day one. It's triaging with the intent of using the information for further investigation and decision making. Leans more towards the investigative side of triage and places the data in your hands right away. You can conduct a scan and analyze on scene, or it can be done, brought back, placed in the lab. Scans could be done and put in a standalone viewer, so the investigator gets to keep the information in their hands while that computer and report move up to the examiner. That way the investigator has the information. So you've made a decision on scene, maybe you found your contraband or you found the stuff you were looking for, but there's more to it, right? What was he doing? Who was he talking to? Where was he going? Websites. Do I need to do preservation orders? Do I need to do search warrants? Are there ever their trader? Has he been trading? Has he been chatting? Has he been, sharing stuff with other people? So referrals may need to be made. Your case doesn't stop. It doesn't cease. When the computer goes for the examination, you get to keep working on it and putting your stuff together. So think of the artifacts that could be collected in minutes. And I am talking minutes. This stuff can be all parsed out. Web browsing, web credentials, usernames, pass numbers, your chat content, downloads, connection logs. You're dealing with somebody who's connecting from different places. I had a case of a homeless person who was pulling into business parking lots and using free Wi-Fi. We were able to locate him based on, good old-fashioned police work and that. But when we got the computer, we had all the access points that we already knew about listed in the connection logs. Exif data, remote access, anti-forensics, cryptocurrency. Just pointing to this stuff in the first couple of minutes not only helps you in your investigation, but also helps the examiner knowing what's in this computer and what he needs to be looking for as well. A lot of examiners, you're going to start out from scratch again, but at least you know what you were getting and why a decision was made that this is maybe the first one in line and not the third one in line. So it puts it in that correct lane, if you will, for processing. Training, just a little bit here, since we've been talking about investigators and examiners. I go around and I do a lot of training on our tool, and a lot of it is with investigators. And there are a lot of cyber investigation courses out there, a lot of free ones out there. So you got to look. Like National White Collar Crime has a bunch of beginner, I don't want to say beginner, but the beginning to build upon. So you are learning all about computers and how to trace the evidence back and how to get there, your basic computer skills, how to seize the evidence, your legal authorities, right? And maybe you're not going to get that from somebody. You're going to get some of it from National White Collar Crime, but a lot of that you're going to learn in your own state as well. Then you move on to, you build upon all that and you do the preview and the triage, and you get some tool specific. But you get comfortable with it when you're building upon it, learning how to boot computers, learning how to change, boot orders if required. Just the different types of systems and keys. It's nothing to be afraid of, if you will. It's the fear of technology. Some people, you're great investigators and you're great at doing the job, but when it comes to touching the computer, you're like, I don't want to do that. I'm just telling you, you do it a couple of times and that confidence builds. Technology really isn't upfront that difficult. You can teach an old dog new tricks. We had this guy, Frank, that I worked with. He didn't even want to turn on his computer. He was that afraid of technology, and getting him to change his email, because we are becoming a paperless society. We had to sit down and relate email on his computer to email at home. When you click on your icon on your desktop, you're opening up your mailbox in front of your house. When you're seeing all the mail there, that's the mail in your hands. When you click on this email, it's you opening the letter. Just relating it that way made it so much easier for him to start using it. And before you knew it, he was coming in every day, checking his email, sending email, so on and so forth. Time and money, those are barriers. It is tough. We all have budgets. But if it's spent the right way, you can save money. Spend it on the front end, but you'll be saving it on the back end. And commitment's one of the things we've come across a lot, not only from you getting into this, but from whoever the boss, the department, the agency is. They have to commit to you as well in this. So that's my spiel on the training at this point. So let's talk forensically sound here for a couple minutes. So live scans, as I said before, the computer is up and running. You're going to triage for typically a USB device. Windows makes changes. Documentation is necessary. You need to say, this is what happens when a USB device is inserted. This is what happens when I executed the program. This is what happened after. The first thing I did was collect RAM, so on and so forth. So you get my drift on there. The computer's running. You just need to know what you're talking about, and it's been widely accepted, especially in all the courts I've ever dealt with. They know it. They go, yeah, we understand that. Triaging devices right from your forensic machine through a write blocker, of course, forensically sound, very good way to do it. Imaging and then doing it, very good way to do it. And in boot mode. So the computer is off, you stick in the USB device, you boot specifically to that USB device, forensically sound. And of course, validation is a big part of any tool that you're using to make sure it does what it says it does. So what's our end game? All right, what do we want out of this? Is a lot into getting into your triage and what you want to get out of it. So you have to think of this up front. How do I want my results? If I'm on scene, typically minutes, right? To 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes. You typically don't want to be running something more than an hour on scene. I know search warrants. It's in no more than 2 or 3 hours on scene, and breakfast by 9 o'clock in the morning with your guy in handcuffs. Do you want just to profile the computer and the user and move on? Do you want to determine what exact computers were involved? Do you want to determine your probable cause up front and make your decisions on scene? Do you want up to the minute reporting? I think that's one of the most important parts, is something that is very important, because if you can have your tool making a report in the background, when you get back to the lab after your decisions, you have an up to the minute report. And I'll get into it a little bit more, but it's your stopping and starting point. And it's going to be based on specificity. Triage works the best when you know what you're looking for, or you're using keywords and hashes that are specific to what you're looking for. So if you spend a few extra minutes getting more data, that's been targeted or specifically called out, that uniqueness in your case, it's going to give you the ability to cover more ground, make more solid decisions. So just think with current workflows. Let me just share here one more poll. I think this is my last poll of the day. But your agency or lab currently has a backlog of digital evidence. I know I talk to people, they're up to date. Some people have, a month, some have 6 weeks, a month and a half, some have more than that. I remember when I first started the lab, I had 6 months or more. But that was better than the state lab, which was running about 18 months to 2 years in that backlog. And like I said, we adopted it early on in my career, or in our lab's existence, to try to cut that back. And by the time I retired, we were running at only a week or two behind on what was coming in and what was going out. But it looks like with about a little more than 2/3 of you voting, 20%, no backlog, a quarter, a month, a quarter, 6 weeks, and then the rest are 6 weeks or more. So that's pretty good. It's good to see that people are working on that. It's really tough with the amount of stuff that's out there today. But let's think about that, the workflow without triage. So you seize, you image, you process, you analyze, you report. If you work it in there, that workflow, you can triage first and then seize, right? That's going to eliminate some of your devices. Or, if you don't like doing stuff on scene, which is perfect, you can still do it in the lab efficiently. You can seize, then triage, and then report. Some of the typical ways now, right? If you go all the way to the bottom, You can triage and seize or seize and triage. You have a report, but you can still analyze, investigate, preserve search warrants, arrest warrants, and such with that stuff in the investigator's hands. But it doesn't stop you from still processing, analyzing, and reporting on, doing a deep dive, a logical, I'm just looking for specific information to put my case together. If it needs a deep dive later, I can pull it back out, but I'm going to make my case and put it to the side. Peace of mind. We all have that one that you're going to sweep out the corners of that case. You're going to look at every corner to make sure there's nothing on there. And you're going to have a peace of mind when you're done that, yep, there was nothing on that computer. Or the ones where you're just pulling out specific, I want the PST files and the registry files, the computer goes back on the shelf and all done. Or I just want a PDF that was stolen. Or I want these specific ledgers so I can continue my investigation, those types of cases. So you can work it into a lot of different places, picking that lane, if you will, as I was saying before. Some considerations as you're doing this, okay? Now that we know we're going to incorporate triage or on-scene investigation, you need to pick your tools, right? What you're going to use, you need to become familiar with them, test them, and prior to using it for the first time, try it out on some evidence that you had, try it out on some cases that you've done, boot some old computers that are no longer evidentiary. We all have had those ones that were turned over. Start doing that, or go home and start scanning computers in your house and seeing what you can put. Well, maybe you don't want to do that, right? But testing it out, back to that validation, making sure your tool's doing what it does. Do you know where your tool grabbed the information from, and can you validate that with another tool? Is it up to date? Is it parsing the latest operating systems and artifacts? Do I have the latest release, even though it's up to date? Have I updated my computer? Have I gone back to see if there's another release prior to using it? Again, validate it. When was the last time I used it? And did I validate any of those results? Once you check a tool, validation could be done on a rolling process. You've picked something out unique in your case, and you say, okay, let me just make sure that where this found it, this other tool finds it there as well. Now, can I customize it? How hard is it for me to bring in the uniqueness, the hashes, and the keywords that I want to run? Can I do that fast? Can I target specific areas of the drive to get exactly what I'm looking for? And will it do all the different operating systems? Can I triage a Windows? Can I triage a MacBook? Can I triage a Linux box or a Linux laptop that may be sitting there? Those are all considerations, because time is of the essence, and creating the right scan to get you what you want is essential. So let's look at some uniqueness and some specific artifacts that can jumpstart your investigation, get you moving in the right direction. Because a lot of this comes down to protection of children, getting a pedophile off the street, seizing assets, making connections with other conspirators, locating and preserving evidence that may be stored in the cloud or with other service providers. So you want to look for that evidence that's going to get you on your way. You're not looking for everything, and that's kind of hard sometimes to remember, or to shed that and remember, I'm just looking for specific information to start putting my case together. I'm looking for probable cause here to move along, because you already have a lot of it before you've already been led to this device. So you usually know you're on the right track at that point. You know your case better than anybody. And usually, in your experiences, when you set out to do your search warrants or your seizures, you typically find out you're in the right place. Very little room for mistakes in the way we do things. I think there was one case we ended up at the wrong house, and we knew it as soon as we were there, and we went back and checked through, and somebody in the investigation missed a number on an IP address. And that was the only time, and you just know your case. When we showed up at the house, we knew we were in the wrong place. which was good, but mistakes do happen. So the first thing to do in any case is to review your reports, your notes, your interviews, your cyber tips, whatever it is that gets you there, and pull out the uniqueness. Pull out that, the keywords or the phrases that are gonna prevent false positives. Because when you're doing a triage, that's one of the things you want to eliminate is going through a lot of false positives. You really want to hit the keywords that are going to lead you to where you want to be. Your first unique, usually the first unique and relevant item is your IP address. You're going to want that in there typically. That's what led you to where you're going, and maybe you could find that in a quick keyword search of specific items. It's an indicator that you're in the right place. Not only that, but your unique keywords and phrases will get you there. You've researched your IP addresses, your usernames, such that hashes. You're not gonna, on a triage, you're not gonna whitelist. You're going to go in and look for specific hashes. Maybe just your category ones in Project Vic, or specific ones that you've hashed now. You brought in the hashes from something that Tumblr sent you. They sent you 100 images. You bring in those hashes. That's specific. That's really going to get you what you're looking for. So remember, keep it limited and keep it unique. You want to focus your triage on that uniqueness. So what kind of artifacts are going to help me with that to keep the investigation going, to eliminate or solidify evidence? Give you enough information to report and give that general profile of the computer usage. What did the review of the case show you? So are we looking for cryptocurrency? Are we looking for anti-forensics? Are we looking for remote access? If none of that's come up in your initial investigation, maybe it's some of the stuff you don't want to spend time on looking for. But those are the decisions, like I said, you have to kind of do. But I can't stress enough, you got to keep it unique, keep it simple. We're not conducting a deep dive investigation when we're doing these. We're trying to hit on all the data that'll keep us going and allow us to make those decisions. So one of the things I like to do here, and I think I've already kind of went through this, keeping it simple, going through what you want. Your artifacts, is it installed? Has it been used? Has it been searched for? Those are really key places to go, especially with cryptocurrency. If you keep it simple and look for just specific keywords related to cryptocurrency, you'll get a pretty good idea of whether it's been run or not. Again, you just need a basic understanding. You need to keep it simple. So when you are looking for these things, you don't need a 2-week course on cryptocurrency to know you're looking for a wallet, or you're looking for specific keywords such as Bitcoin or Ethereum or Armory or some of these other programs there. And if you take these keywords and run them against specific artifacts, then you're going to get what you want. You're going to reduce a lot of the false positives for pulling the word Armory out of somewhere you don't care if it's there. It'll kind of make sense with some of the things I'm going to show you here in a couple of minutes. Move on here. So you don't need to be an expert, and that's kind of the ones I'm trying to say. You need to know, what's the subject, like here, crypto. What's the subject and what do we want from it? What evidence will be crucial to me as an on-scene investigator, but will also help the forensic examiner later. He's the one that's going to go through and do a lot of the deep dive work on the cryptocurrency. You just need to know or be able to tell him that, hey, it's on here. This wallet's going to need, we're going to need to get into this, or we're going to need this, this, and that. So it really helps. What's going to help you make a decision? Those are the things you need to do. And like I said, you don't need to take a 2-week class to be for a forensic examiner in order to triage it. You just need to know the basics about it and what you want to look for. So like I said, break it down to its basics. What could be recovered in a timely manner? You're looking for the different types of softwares, the different types of files that belong to it, the terminology used with it, some of the websites that are specific to cryptocurrency. Maybe you could look through, run the keywords against some chats or some of the web records, which would help you determine whether they were utilizing that as well. And as always, regular expression keywords can be, if they can be used, they really help out in getting rid of false positive and narrowing in exactly what you're looking for. And regular expression could be a whole nother webinar. So we're just going to leave it at that for right now. Let's see here. So other types of things, like I was talking with crypto, anti-forensics, what kind of programs are you worried about being on the computer? What kind of encryption programs, what kind of, wiping tools, remote access, your swatting cases and things like that, where they're using TeamViewer to get into somebody else's computer to dial a number, cryptocurrency, social media, cloud storage, all these are ways that you can build your uniqueness and see if they're being used on scene and really help you out in your case. Looking here, these are some keyword results from a search. So you can see up here blue, CCleaner was looked for, which is an anti-forensic device. But I was talking about looking through your artifacts and listing out. You can tell that I'm not showing the whole screen here, but the files were found. Browsing history was found on it. It was downloaded and it was installed. So I know right off the bat, CCleaner is I may not have all the web data that I'm looking for on this computer. Same with here over with Tor browser, anti-forensic devices. You can see some files were here. It's been used, it's been looked up, and it's been application usage and recent files, so it's been opened. So a Tor browser is in play on this computer as well. Timeliness. So putting together the items you want in your scan should be kept in line with the speed that you want, right? So I said, you don't want everything. You're looking to be unique. If you're looking to keep your scans under 20 minutes or your triage under 20 minutes, you're going to have to nix, like running the entire VIX database, which is like where we all want to go. We want to get everything, but you got to remember it's triage. If there's a way for you to break that into the category 1s and 2s, those are the most important, then that's what you put in there. Your keywords, what you're going to run them against, instead of searching for just the word black, maybe you want to put what the actual username was, like blackj245 or something like that. You want to make sure that you are unique in that. Have a plan, prepare your hardware, have it tested before you go out. There's nothing worse than getting on the scene and finding out that something's not right, that your profile's not correct, or you forgot to put something in, or your USB device isn't working properly. So test before you go out. Remember your goals, right? It's triage, or it's an on-scene investigation, and it's meant to be fast. My goal is to make decisions on scene. My goal is to make those decisions, make an arrest, eliminate computers on scene. I want reports. I want to be able to report as soon as I get back to the station, to my lab. I want to be able to print out a report and say, here's where I'm at in my case. I want to link artifacts. If you see here in this picture, and it's a clean picture, it's a nice little bulldog there, but if that was the picture that was of interest to me, you want to be able to link artifacts. So if you can link that this picture was downloaded and there's recent file entries and you could see that it's in the user's path right away, or you can see what else is in there, you've put that user to the file without having to do a lot more analysis. So linking artifacts is really important when you're building that PC, not just, hey, there's contraband. Yeah, that helps. That definitely, that's your computer at that point, but is that enough to say, without some good old-fashioned police work and confessions, the next step here would be, hey, let's link some artifacts and just say that this is the user that did it. Kind of helps you out. Some on-scene, if you're not doing, if you're using it on scene and not just in the lab. Safety always, of course. I didn't mention it through here, but always safety. Photo and video prior to searching and seizing, because you're going to do it when you back out. Whether you're going to disconnect the internet when you go in. We did a case once way back. It was eBay fraud, selling the same computer over and over. And when we went in, we were just expecting 1 or 2 computers, and we disconnected the internet, and the phone started going crazy, ringing, and we found out that he actually had 7 servers hidden in a closet, and he was actually hosting and doing things like that. So that also helped us identify that there were more devices in the house before we actually started going through everything. Scanning your devices, collecting RAM, always remember that. Interviews, making decisions. Interviews are very important. That's the good old-fashioned police work. I never want to take that out of this. Technology is great, but good old-fashioned police work, or even, if you're not law enforcement, you're private, those upfront interviews and getting answers that way really, really help out. And then putting it all together. A quick analysis on scene, tagging your records are critical to your decision-making process, helps build the report, present PC, and keeps you up to date on reporting. As I was saying before, it's a stopping and a starting point. A report can be very simple, artifact listings, bookmarked items, evidence, showing the process you took to get where you are. It's a definite stopping and starting point in the fact that, okay, I've done this on scene. This is the information all the way up to here. I found the contraband. I've got a confession. I've linked some artifacts, and I put the guy in cuffs. So here's where my investigation stopped at this point, and this is my report for court tomorrow morning. But it's a starting point because now you have this information to keep your investigation going. So it's definitely a stopping and starting point. So reporting is important at this fact. It's also a starting point if you're sending the computer out somewhere else. So it's going to go somewhere else for that investigation, and they know where you stopped and started from as well for another examination. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. Thank you very much for listening. Again, join us on February 7th. We're going to do an intro to Triage Investigator. That's tool specific, where we kind of take all these principles and put it together there. We do have free trials, 30-day trials at tryadf.com, 100% fully functional, 100% support with those. And I want to thank you for your time, and we do have a couple of questions here that we will try to get through, and if you have any more, please feel free to ask those. So I have a question here. What is the difference between live scan and triage? Kind of interchangeable. A live scan is a computer that is up and powered on, and the triage portion of that is what you're doing, what you're scanning for, and what you're pulling off of that computer. So a live scan is the computer's powered up, and you are scanning that computer or doing your triage, if you will, of the data. How do you basically validate a tool? Is validation a common practice in most labs? Yeah, so definitely want to validate a tool. If a tool claims to do something, the tool claims to parse out, let's just go with the connection logs. So the computer connects and disconnects and gives you maybe Wi-Fi stuff. So it pulls that out for you. What you want to do is go look at those logs and make sure that the information is correct, that it's coming from where they say it's coming from, because your tool should list that. This is where I got the information. This is where we pulled it from, and you should be able to validate that in another tool that does the same thing, or by doing looking for it manually. And yeah, that is common practice in most labs, because you want to be able to, if you ever have to testify to it, to say, yes, I know this is where it came from, and I've tested it, and I know that this tool is doing what it says it's supposed to do. Doing a triage, can it help one collect cloud data? So depends on the tool. It depends on your legal authority. In the cases that I'm talking about, where we're not extending those, where we're just looking at the data on the device, yes, you can pull credentials from username from web browsing or from certain areas, and find those credentials for your cloud services, or at least know with certain data, like I was showing with the keywords before for like CCleaner. If you target your keyword searches towards your cloud storage, you'd be able to pick up that, hey, Dropbox is installed. It's been looked up for on the web, or there's numerous, web records for it, and it's been executed, it's been downloaded. It's really going to help you further your investigation into that and doing your preservation orders or your search warrants for those. Let's say, okay, I got Dropbox, here's the username, let me do my preservation order right now and fax that out. So instead of 2 weeks from now learning that, you have it that afternoon after getting back from your search warrant and you're doing your work. Those were the questions for today. Again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate taking the time out of your day and listening to me. And again, try ADF.com and webinar next week. Thank you very much.